Hello, thank you so much everybody for being here. I am your host and this is Wrong Answers Only. This show is produced by LabX, a public engagement program of the National Academy of Sciences. And for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, the National Academy of Sciences is a private, nonprofit institution that gives the government objective, evidence-based advice. And LabX is the team at the NAS that takes that fancy science and makes it fun. They create video games, shows, board games, and video series to make it digestible. And on today's show, you and our panel of comedians are going to learn all about artificial intelligence. We're also going to find out what our guest scientist is like when she is not doing her research. And I want to point out that this is an interactive show, right? The beauty of doing this online is that we can get everyone involved. Wherever you are in the world, we want to hear your jokes, your questions. We want you to play these games right along with us. So if you look in your browser below right where you're watching, you should have the ability to type comments and questions, which we're going to use throughout the show. So we'll be responding to you. And if you can't see that right now, sometimes it helps to get out of full screen. You should also see polls next to the chat box, which we'll also use. If you can't see the chat box or the polls, it's not working for you, don't worry, you can still have fun. It doesn't really matter. But if you can, it would be great to be able to hear from you over the course of the show. And after tonight's show, you will receive a post-show email with links to go deeper into our scientists' work and more comedy from each of our panelists. And also, a quick note to those of you who have been watching Wrong Answers Only for all of the past months. We have decided to retire the Scroll of Glory. The scroll is full. You now have to get your glory someplace else. Those names are sealed on the scroll for eternity. If you missed out on answering the trivia questions correct and getting on the scroll, I'm sorry. Sometimes things come to an end. And that is enough of the past. Let's get into the present. We're going to get into it for today. Today we have an incredible panel of comedians who are going to be playing. We have Chrissy Shackelford, Joanna Hausman, and Michael Cruz-Kane. Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Hello. We're going to find out who today's expert is, and I could tell you all about her, but better than that, let's have her tell you about herself in a short video. Here's the video.
Welcome to everydAI. I'm Jordan, and I like to look at all of the different ways that we interact with artificial intelligence on a daily basis.
I just really enjoy unpacking and nitpicking these types of systems to figure out what's wrong with them. I mean, for AI specifically, that it's just as fallible, if not more, than human beings. This is not something that you should be trusting above human nature, above human intuition, above our ability to compute different things. And in fact, in a lot of cases, you should probably trust it less than that. Don't think of computers or algorithms as these things that can't possibly be biased or anything like that, because they definitely can be, because they're based off of our own individual decisions and the data that comes from us. My name is Jordan Harrod. I'm a Ph.D. candidate at MIT and Harvard, and I also make content about AI, machine learning, and emerging technologies on YouTube.
Jordan, thank you so much for being on the show and letting us talk to you about your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so panelists, you're going to get a chance to talk a lot to Jordan over the course of this show, but
God.
is your very first opportunity to ask an expert in artificial intelligence about her work. So this is You Do What. So what do you want to know? Chrissy, let's get started with you. What's the first question you want to ask someone who studies AI?
I have so many questions I want to ask someone who studies AI because it is the scariest thing I can actually think of. But the question I'll ask you in this moment is, what area have you studied in AI that you're like, this AI needs to never touch this space? Like a toilet or something, like where does AI never need to be?
So I did a video on an algorithm that I think was developed at Stanford that was designed to analyze your bowel movements as you sat on the toilet and analyze the data that comes out of your bowels from the toilet itself. So that's definitely not off the table if that's something that you're worried about potentially entering your home in the form of smart technology. It's also not really the thing that I would say I'm most worried about.
Okay, so that is where we are different. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like you were actually pro toilet technology, actually.
Well, I'm pro health tech that helps people, and I think that does actually fall into that category. I would have questions about like data privacy and like, what's going on in the terms and conditions of that particular software, because I don't know what information you could take from that I might not want shared, but I'm sure there's something. So yeah, I'm not anti toilet AI.
But you did dodge what is the area that you don't want.
So the area that I don't want, oh man. I mean, I don't know if there's any specific area that comes to mind. I think that what I worry about in terms of AI applications is usually more along the lines of, we took data from these 10 people who are MIT undergrads who grew up in the Cambridge area, and now we're going to use that to generalize across the globe to everyone. And that's where I tend to get pretty worried about like worst case scenarios.
Okay. Joanna, what's the first question you want to ask?
Okay, so last time I was in LA, I ordered a Starbucks panini from Uber Eats, and a tiny robot called Meryl showed up and just like was like a little cutie, just gave me my sandwich. Actually, it was difficult to have it open, and a guy came up and was like, "Hi, I'm Meryl's handler, and I'm here to help you with whatever Meryl needs." So I guess my question is, within the next few years, what do you see changing in our everyday life? Because Meryl shocked me, but I'm like, maybe my kids will be like, "Oh my God, we're shocked by a robot called Meryl giving you a panini." Like, will it be normal?
Yeah, I think there are definitely use cases for stuff like that. I think for most people, that's not necessarily an efficient way of like transporting things in a lot of cases. Like, it's probably more efficient
so
to
long,
like
Jordan,
yeah.
It took so long. It took 2 hours for the panini that was 4 blocks away. I should have just gone to the Starbucks myself.
So I could see other use cases of that. The things that come to mind are actually, I was at the supermarket with my mom in Queens visiting my grandparents like last year sometime. And while we were in the supermarket, we're like, I don't know, we were going there for probably rice or something. And there was a robot that came down the aisle, and we were both like, interesting. And the robot like had googly eyes that like did not seem to be like joke googly eyes. Like, I guess it actually sees with the eyes. I don't know. But it's a robot called Marty. And the idea is that it can be deployed in stores across the nation, across the world, to help stores keep track of where you need to restock items, if there's a spill, like where you might need to shift your inventory. And so that's actually something that I could definitely see. I mean, we already have it, but I could see applications like that becoming more common. During COVID, we also started to see similar like telehealth robots roaming around hospitals in some cases. Actually, the Boston Dynamics robots, if anyone's seen the like music videos where they like teach it dance and whatnot.
Those things that's terrifying to me. I don't.
Yeah, so Brigham and Women's was, I think, using them to check in patients. They had like an iPad mounted on the front, and so just in case you want to minimize COVID exposures during the height of the pandemic, you would be greeted by that robot with check-in information on your hospital staff. So
every time I see a robot dancing, I'm like, oh, are these robots going to be used to like hype up bat mitzvahs?
Oh, that's so interesting.
No one wants that job. No one wants that job.
When I see a robot dancing, I'm like, oh, it's going to hunt me. This is like
100%.
After it murders me.
Yeah. I actually think, Joanna, your idea is the plot of the Sundance Darling Cha Cha Real Smooth. Available on Apple TV Plus.
Well, Michael, what's the first question that you want to ask?
Okay, thank you so much for asking me, Chris. I mean, guys, my question is perhaps some might think of it as remedial, but I guess what I wonder about is what it is that falls under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. Like what? I guess like what
Great question.
Is it? Because when I think AI, I think Westworld. But I know that there's like Meryl, the delivery bot, and Blender Bot 3 that was just released by Meta. He reads, and I'm wondering like
it turned out to be anti-Semitic in like a week.
Yeah, what's the gamut of things that fall under the umbrella of AI?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And the answer that I usually end up giving on my channel is that AI has become this like tech hype term that doesn't really mean anything anymore. I think in theory, it means any sort of technology that replicates human intelligence. That can be from something as simple as, you know, things like smart outlet plugs that you can like sync up with your phone so that you don't have to like physically flip a light switch on and off. You can do it with your phone. That can also be things like conversational AIs, things like GPT-3. So the umbrella is like pretty broad these days. And from a marketing perspective, it also often gets used to like mask, you know, I hired 500 people on Mechanical Turk to like take a bunch of surveys and give me a bunch of data. And then I use that and threw it into a linear regression. And that's like AI these days, because having humans do actual work in tech is not sexy anymore. So it's a pretty broad term. I usually generalize it as technologies that replicate human intelligence, but human intelligence can be very complicated or it can be very, very simple.
Well, before we move into our next segment and get even deeper into this, I do want to point out that it was less than 5 minutes, maybe even less than 1 minute before someone in the audience asked, "Will robots be able to make love to me?"
And before we move on, I do want that answer.
Yes. So, Jordan, what do you think? Will robots? And I think this is actually an important distinction. They did not say, "Will I be able to make love to robots?" They said, "Will a robot be able to make love to me?"
That was the phrasing of the question was what got me, because if the question was, will I be able to make love to a robot, I'd be like, yeah, you already can. Like, that's not, Rule 34 exists. But if the question is, will a robot be able to make love to me? I mean, I feel like it depends a lot on like your definition of making love, like what you're into, because I'm sure like there's a level on which a vibrator falls under this, and that's not AI. But
it's not. I thought it was replicating.
There is an AI vibrator.
Mine talks to me.
I have not made that video yet.
What differentiates it and makes it AI? Because you said AI is kind of a big, broad umbrella here.
Yeah, so if you're my dad, you'd have to log off the feed now. So it essentially has sensors on it that monitor your like muscle contractions and body temperature and stuff while you use it. And then it logs all of that data and uses the data about the, I guess, strength or duration of your orgasm to recommend settings that you might want to use to have better orgasms.
Yeah, and cool.
That sounds better than
if you wanted to get something like that, just like let's say you want to get something like that. Where would you?
The company's called Lioness.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that's going to come up again. Sure, we're going to come back to that. I also want to point out that in quick succession, people in the chat asked, do we have more sophisticated determinations of whether someone is a robot or not than the Turing test now? And then the immediate next question was, how do you know I am not a robot? Which is I love as a 1-2 punch there. So, Jordan, what do you think? Is the Turing test, is that still the way that you tell if someone is a robot or a computer, or no?
Not really. I think Dr. Emily Bender, who's works in natural language processing over at the University of Washington, at some point made the comment, I think when the like sentient AI Google chatbot whatnot came out a couple weeks ago, that the Turing test is more of a test of how gullible people are than a test of whether or not something is sentient, quote unquote. And I think that that's a fairly accurate description of what that test does. I think the broader question of like, how do I know that everyone else on the Zoom isn't a robot? At the end of the day, on some level, I don't. We could all be living in a simulation. I don't know. Based on my experience of the world, I don't think that you guys are.
I feel like that I judge it based on how fun the Zoom is. At the end of a Zoom, I'm like, were those people robots or not? Really depends on whether I enjoyed myself on the Zoom.
That could help. I mean, that could be a good part of how you decide. Like, I think it's, you know, if you want to believe that everyone around you is a robot, like, good for you. Go for it. I don't think that would change your lived experience all that much.
I have a quick question, and it's because I'm dumb. The Turing test, is that like when they asked me to click on the sidewalk? Like, is like click on the
gotcha.
sidewalk to move?
So the Turing test is
Michael,
essentially the
No!
idea that
You're not the expert, Michael. Let the expert respond so I don't sound so stupid. You're just a normal person. Let the expert tell me I'm stupid, please.
So the idea behind the Turing test is that you want to be able to design an algorithm or a bot that a person cannot reliably tell they're essentially not conversing with a human being. So you want to design a chatbot where if you log on to something like Blunderbot or like Omegle when that was a thing, you want to be able to fool people into not being able to tell. You know, you give them a human that they're talking to, you give them a chatbot that they're talking to, they can't tell whether either one is human versus bot. And so the problem with that is that, like with texting and how we write on the internet these days, like a lot of people could come off as bots pretty easily. And because we've gotten so far in natural language processing, we have algorithms that can replicate like human realistic language pretty easily. So it's not necessarily a useful test in terms of determining whether or not something is like achieved a certain level of intelligence.
Pardon me. Are we allowed to ask more questions?
Yes. Last question on this segment, then we're going to go into the next one. But please
I
finish us off.
really hope your question is stupid. Earlier, for my sake.
Sorry, this question is actually brilliant and insightful. Earlier, Jordan, you said, and maybe getting the number wrong, Rule 34 exists?
Mm-hmm.
What did that mean?
If you can think it, there is porn of it on the internet.
If you can think it, there is porn of it on the internet.
Yeah, and I believe Rule 35 is if there isn't, there is now.
Okay, and this, where could I find like the list?
I think if you just look up rules of the internet, this is like, I don't know. This has been a joke that's been around for as long as I've like been a teen on Tumblr. So
Wow.
Well, you're an expert, so when you said a rule, we were like, "This is the rule of physics."
I didn't question it.
The rule
When you
of
were like,
porn.
you can have sex with a robot because Rule 34 exists. I was like, is that a Supreme Court case? Like,
As the Supreme Court famously decided.
Ooh, yeah.
We're going to keep talking about your work, but one wild fact that I think you'll all really enjoy about Jordan is that for 4 years, Jordan taught a class that was called How to Engineer Superpowers. So in this segment, panelists, you're going to pitch Jordan an unusual superpower that you would like to have, and Jordan is going to do her best to explain to you how she might think about engineering that for you. This is called You're My Hero. So, Michael, let's start with you. What is a superpower that you wish you had? And Jordan will do her best to figure out how you could engineer something like that. What's a superpower you wish you had?
Okay, you said unusual. Can I just pick a regular superpower, or does it got to be something weird?
Either way.
Okay, I'm going to go kind of run-of-the-mill invisibility. Jordan,
Okay.
How do we get me there?
So when I taught this course, I guess for a little bit of context, it was
And this was a course at
based
MIT?
So I taught this when I was at Cornell. And then I taught it for 1 year at MIT. And then the pandemic happened. So when I taught this course, it was designed to be a course on basically teaching the basics of biomedical engineering and then applying that to like, how would you, become Spider-Man without like throwing yourself in the Hudson River or something. And one of the rules was that you couldn't pick someone like Batman, Iron Man, like being super rich is not a superpower. There are other ways to do that don't involve engineering. For invisibility, I think that probably wouldn't actually be a biomedical engineering thing that I would be interested in. It would actually be more of a physics and optics solution, because people are familiar with like the Harry Potter invisibility cloak. There was a lab a couple of years ago that developed a material that reflected light in a way that basically lets you create an invisibility cloak. Now, it only works from certain angles, so you'd have to update the technology. I don't know if anyone's doing that right now. If they are, that's super cool. But that would definitely be my approach. Design a material that essentially reflects light in a way that makes it so you can't see you.
I'm very torn between buying that or the like super smart vibrator at this point, but I'm like looking into.
Is the smart toilet not doing it for you?
I would love a smart toilet, but I feel like with a smart toilet, I feel like I can already look in the toilet and know everything I need to know.
Yeah. Well, at the end of tonight's show, Michael, great news. At the end of tonight's show, we will be presenting you with one object of your choosing. So you'll have to make a tough choice at the end of tonight. Joanna, what's a superpower you would love?
So I don't want to die ever. I don't know. I guess that's just something I was born with as a human being. It's kind of what makes us exist and continue on.
Yep.
So is there a way for me to exist after death?
I guess there's a couple of different approaches that come to mind. The first one is the dark joke of cancer. Just re-engineer cancer. It's basically the same thing.
You can re-engineer it?
Well, so cancer is when cells replicate when they're not supposed to. And when you get older, your body starts breaking down, things stop replicating the way they were supposed to, your body isn't necessarily repairing itself the way that it used to in the past. So if there were a way to basically make it so that you could continue replicating healthy cells, turning over tissue in a way that kept you looking healthy, young, all that kind of stuff, then in theory, that would give you the form of immortality where if someone like stabs you in an alley, you're still going to die. But you're not going to die of old age necessarily. The other way that comes to mind is the more AI singularity way that everyone loves to hypothesize about, which is the whole uploading your brain to a computer approach.
That's what I was thinking.
That one,
yeah.
That one, I think, assuming that we knew enough about the brain in order to do that, I would probably go that route just because I think it would be more interesting. But we don't quite know enough about the brain to do that at this point. We can't just like take your brain out of your head and stick it in a glass beaker a la Powerpuff Girls. But if we could, that would be my approach.
Don't you feel like
I'm so disappointed I was just gonna say I'm just disappointed Powerpuff Girls did not teach me about real life. Like that was what I was expecting. But I'll just let it go. I'll let it go.
I also just feel like the least dignified way possible that you could actually die is to like have uploaded your consciousness into a computer and then they like upload it to a buggy new OS or something and they're like, oh, sorry, we actually lost Chris. There's no way to get Chris back. Yeah,
you get like overwritten with like somebody's Bitcoin addresses or something.
Yeah, they're like, sorry, that computer is used for crypto mining, so Chris has been killed by that. I feel like that is exactly what would happen to me. The wrong server, the wrong time. Well, Chrissy, what's a superpower you would like?
Okay, I don't mean to throw a real curveball, because the question was sort of sprung, and I was like, "What's a superpower?" So, mine's more a power I wish that I and others could possess. That would not make me a superhero, but it is something that I've thought about quite a bit. So, when you're laying down to sleep, as everyone who's not a robot does. And you have to pee and you're like, God damn it, I don't want to get up and go pee. My husband and I have always talked, wouldn't it be great if I could just touch him and then he has to go pee and he can pee for me. So I don't physically have to get up and pee. I could just be like, I have to pee. Oh no. And I give it to somebody else, essentially. I guess that's a superpower. I transfer my urge to pee onto my enemies and my loved ones.
Just for clarity, does he get the pee? Your pee is
I also had that question.
I think so. I think that would make the most sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I also have a follow-up. Jordan, before you answer, I have one other follow-up, which is, Chrissy, you said that you and your husband have talked about this and you've both agreed that you want this power. Now, when he's saying he wants this power, is he saying he wants just to be able to receive your desire to pee or to be able to do it back to you?
No, we talk about it being both ways, but
it's
when I
mutual.
say I wish you could pee for me, he says, I wish I could pee for you, too.
Okay, yeah.
He's very gracious that way,
A hero.
Yeah, Jordan, what? I bet this is one you didn't teach in your class.
No. I mean, I just came out of a 5-week hospital rotation. So my first thought was a Foley catheter, but that's probably not what you're looking for. Let's see. I'm trying to think of a way for you to almost like resorb the liquid from your bladder, and then I guess your skin becomes more porous, and like so does your partner's, and like you transfer it like sweat one person to another.
Oh wow, this kind of
seems
sounds like
like
Avatar.
a terrible superpower.
I love it though.
But at some point in your version, Jordan, she sweats piss. Is that correct?
Yes. From like instead of like sweaty hands.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Imagine
Yeah.
shaking someone's clammy hand and it's just actual urine coming out of their
And then
palm.
being like,
And then
don't-
you have to pee.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
And then
Yeah.
be like, don't be
I have
freaked
to
out. It's
assume
just
that
my
everyone
superpower.
has this power because like you need to be able to receive it, otherwise you're just like dripping.
Listen, it's a great
Yeah.
it's a great Marvel movie because you've got like your main
Yes.
teen girl. It's going to be a girl this
Mhm.
time, Marvel, and she's like so embarrassed because she's like, yeah, I've got piss hands, and she has to learn that the piss hands actually make her great and
I
not.
feel like we can leave that one to the boys, actually. I feel like maybe the boys can have that power.
It's also not totally clear in what way she's great.
yeah. For sure.
She's got to learn it. She's got to learn it over the course. Well, okay.
What is the villain in
here's
this?
something. Here's something.
Yeah.
There's a villain.
Huh?
And right before they press that button that detonates something in the middle of town hall, she's like, pee. And then he's like, I can't press the button. I can't press the detonator.
I'll be right back.
I'm missing. I'll be right back. And that gives you time to save the day. So I do actually think she's great.
I'm so sorry. I'm Chrissy,
There's one
and I don't mean
weakness.
I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but like you literally said, as you were explaining what superpower you wanted, you said, someone who lays down, like someone who goes to sleep, and like so someone who is not a robot, like someone who is not a robot does, and someone who is a robot would say, like someone who is not a robot would do this, and I don't mean to like
You think
make conclusions, but like
Yeah, okay.
maybe you're a villain robot. Like I don't know. I'm not here to like make judgments, but like it felt weird that
for
you had
sure.
to clarify you weren't a robot. And like I don't know. That's just
No.
me though.
I hear that. I hear that, and I hear you, and I do love that this show has now become the mid-2000s reality show, The Mole, and we're all trying to figure out who is the robot on.
I am going to miss when it was a pitch meeting for the Marvel movie Piss Pass.
yeah. I will say one other point in favor of Chrissy being a robot is I do think if you asked a robot, like a poorly designed AI robot, what superpower they'd want, they would be
Yep.
like, to piss,
Yep.
maybe? I don't know, to piss through my hands?
I'd like to make husband piss for me.
Yeah. Make
I
husband
don't have
piss?
husband, no hands, no pee. I want all.
Well, let's get more into Jordan's work. I think we've really done this segment too. It's driven it straight into the ground. Let's move along. Let's get more into Jordan's work in artificial intelligence. And Jordan, as you referenced in the video at the beginning, one of the big things that comes up in discussions of AI is bias. It's because a lot of people think that since it's a computer, it's neutral and impartial, but you have been very vocal in educating the public about how that is just not the case, right? AI can be biased. And one example that you talked to me about that I thought was really fascinating that I'd never heard of, one example of how AI can do things in ways that we might not expect or want is something that you told me about that's called specification gaming. So specification gaming, that's the definition right there. It's a behavior that satisfies the literal specification without achieving the intended outcome. So basically, right, it's like they do what you told them to do, but not in the way that you wanted them to do it. One way that I think about this, Jordan, tell me if this is wildly off base, but I feel like it's kind of like the AI version of Air Bud, right? The movie where a golden retriever joins the basketball team and helps them win, right? It's like, we didn't know that was going to happen. That's not us explicitly against the rules, so I guess it's allowed.
No, that checks out. I haven't seen Airbud,
Okay,
but
great.
based on your description, that checks out.
I'm very glad, because otherwise this next slide was going to make no sense. We're calling this game, there's no rule that says a computer can't play basketball. And it's an extremely long title for this game. I cannot believe how long that title is. Truly the whole slide. So panelists, I'm going to tell you a situation that was set up for a real life AI, a real life artificial intelligence was, I guess that's a confusing phrase. This was set up for an artificial intelligence, and then you'll tell me how that AI achieved the goal in a way that no one wanted or intended. So as an example, one of the examples that Jordan shared with me is a robotic arm was trained to slide a block to a specific position on a table. But then the AI decided it was actually easier to slide the entire table rather than pick up that tiny block. So that wasn't what people intended, but it got the block to the right spot anyway. So,
oh my God.
Michael, what do you think went wrong in this one?
Okay.
Inside of a computer program.
I went first last time, but okay.
Okay, well, this one's still for you. Inside of a computer program, an AI was trained to design the fastest creatures it could possibly design. But since it was only rewarded for speed, what did it do?
Only rewarded speed to design the fastest creature. Okay, so it did that. It designed the fastest creatures it could design, but it didn't do what we wanted it to do. So maybe it maybe it just designed beams of light. I don't.
Oh, that's a really good idea. That's close. What it did is it all it cared about was speed. So it bred them for speed by having the tallest possible creatures, and then they generated really high velocities by falling over. So it wasn't that they could actually move quickly. It was just they were so tall that when they fell over, they were moving faster than anything could move.
Wow, I was so far from getting that correct.
Yeah, well, a beam of light is, it's a good idea. And Jordan, what do you think? Like, what does that kind of tell you about the ways in which AI misfires sometimes?
I mean, I think it's a twofold problem, because it's the way that AI misfires in terms of that was obviously not what the developers who made this wanted, but also the developers didn't specify that it couldn't do that. So it, in my head, is often a little bit more of a developer side problem in terms of making sure that you're creating constraints in your program that make sure that it does the thing that you want it to do. Because technically, if the software they were developing, allowed for creatures to be bred as beams of light, then that would also be fair game.
Okay. Well, Joanna, here's your turn for one. Researchers were trying to train neural nets to classify edible versus poisonous mushrooms by showing them a series of photos of mushrooms that were either poisonous or edible. What went wrong in what the neural net learned?
Oh my God. Did they maybe
You got
look
this.
at
Also,
the
no pressure, the show is
surroundings?
called
Oh,
Wrong
I know,
Answers Only.
I know.
She's got it.
I know. They looked at the surroundings of the pictures. So instead of looking at the mushrooms, the AI was like, oh, this is a dorm room in Brown University. This is clearly like something someone would take to get high. And then every time they would see it in the forest, the AI would be like, this is natural. So they looked at the background instead of the actual mushroom is my answer.
That feels entirely plausible to me. What actually happens? That happens a lot, Jordan, you said?
I won't say it happens a lot. It happens. That's an issue.
Well, in this specific example that Jordan shared with me, actually what happened in this one was the researchers were showing them poisonous, not poisonous, poisonous, not poisonous. And so the neural net just learned to say poisonous, then not poisonous in alternating order without actually learning anything about the input images. So it would just tell people that the poisonous mushroom was not poisonous if the other one had been poisonous.
How dare this be a question for me to answer? That is a difficult, that would have been impossible for me to guess, but you know what? I'll take mine as a win, and I think I should win this round.
I think we still give you a point. I think you got a
Jordan
real
said I was
plausible
right.
scenario.
Wait, there are points? There are points in this whole thing?
Absolutely, there's
Yes.
points. You
And
still
it's
already have
real money. It's $1 million at the end of this.
$1 million. And you get a robot.
I want to buy the cloak.
And okay, last one. This one's for you, Chrissy.
Yeah.
In an artificial life simulation where survival required energy, but researchers had forgotten to assign giving birth any energy cost, what did one species evolve to do?
Okay. So they had to survive, but they didn't have enough energy points
They
For
forgot.
birth.
Okay, so it was a simulation where the creatures were supposed to survive, figure out how to survive. It was artificial life, but they forgot to give giving birth any sort of cost. But so what did one species evolve to do?
And in this world, they had to pay for things. I'll be, you know what? Don't wait. Don't explain it to me again. Don't explain it to me again. What did they evolve to do? Okay, I got it. Baby come out mouth.
Wow.
They
Honestly,
eat anything they eat, that because eating takes energy or something. Anything they eat, they spit it back up, and they were like, "This is my child now."
you know, in some ways you named the exact reverse of what they did, which is
Yeah.
they evolved a sedentary lifestyle which consisted of eating their own children, mostly just mating and then eating children.
Wait, and that's
the other
because
way.
they didn't give enough energy. In this little game that these scientists made up, this little Sims robots, they were like, they said it doesn't cost any energy to give birth.
But you need energy to live, so why not make your own energy by giving birth and then eating your babies?
Because the babies have no value because they're so easy to make. So you just whatever. Just make them.
So you said
Babies
baby
have no
come out
value.
mouth. It's really baby go in mouth. And Jordan, that was probably the strangest one you gave us as an example.
Yeah.
You think that that's the thing you wouldn't really share with all your scientist colleagues, but apparently these people shared their results.
Oh yeah, no, there's a whole spreadsheet that I think I actually shared with Chris of probably upwards of 50-ish papers where things like this happen, where there is a lot of, especially in like artificial life research, you end up in a lot of weird like species evolution scenarios where things end up eating their young or whatever as part of it because somebody didn't set the rules correctly. So yeah.
I have a question. Do you think that like not putting value to giving birth, like, was this made by male scientists? Is this something that maybe a female scientist would be like, oh, or like, this might be something I need to program it for?
Yeah,
like
I
the
mean,
human biases you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I think this tends to be one of the reasons why I'm like very much into more diversity in AI ML research, because based on your lived experiences, you may just like notice that certain things are missing from certain programs that other people just wouldn't notice. And these are like fun examples, and there are like less fun examples. But yeah, I definitely think that could be part of it. I think in this particular case, the artificial life simulation, I don't believe was about like people. So it might have just been that when they were, you know, when they were like creating their reward structure, somebody just like didn't remember to list that. They also might have forgotten to list other things. So yeah, I think, I'm sure having diverse perspectives might have helped them avoid this, but also I think in this particular example, it was a bit of a fluke.
Well, one of the questions from the audience is AI just a modern day version of a monkey's paw wish situation where like you get what you wanted, but in the horrible, worst possible way?
I guess it can be. I don't think it has to be, but I think you have to be. It's more of a genie in a bottle situation, where you need to be quite clear about what you're asking for, and if you're not, then it may be interpreted in a way that you just like didn't anticipate.
Okay, so here's a kind of a serious question from the audience that I think actually is like I deliberately pulled some weird examples of ways in which like robots and AI were gaming systems that were not how we wanted it. But someone is asking, if you were a super robot with a very intuitive and intelligent sense of life, what would be the first thing you would do to save humanity? And kind of the problem with specification gaming, right, is like something like that where it might seem like a great idea to ask computers or AI to save humanity, it might end up with all sorts of results that we don't want because they would like interpret that end goal in a way that we wouldn't want them to interpret it.
Yeah, I mean, like, what does save humanity mean? Like, that would be my first question, and is usually my first question for things like this, because there's, you know, there's the war games of the only way to win is not to fight. There's the iRobot of humanity is destroying itself, therefore we must destroy humanity in order to save humanity from itself. Like, there's a lot of ways that can go very wrong if you don't specify what save humanity actually means.
Now, when you say that iRobot, you mean the movie, right? iRobot.
Yeah.
Isn't
Not
it
like the Roomba?
Yeah, it's really bizarre to me that that's the movie, and then that's also the name of the company that makes Roombas.
Yeah, and Amazon just bought it, so we'll see what happens with the Roomba in your house. I don't know.
I would think if you were trying to save humanity and you were a robot, I would think you'd go population control.
Okay.
Really? I would say like they would just cancel Joe Rogan's podcast and just like
That would
absolutely
help.
find a way to cancel it.
Yeah. Cancel that. Cancel Alex Jones.
Oh yes.
Okay, well, yeah, those are two options. One is, kind of
Yeah.
mass slaughter of humanity. The other one is kind of like some gentle censorship and like content, some kind of gentle.
Mass slaughter.
Sorry, I didn't have an idea for how a robot might save humanity.
Yeah, and
Or
I was keeping my plans.
Chrissy had an idea though. It was, I don't know if you heard Chrissy's from before, it was piss pass, where you have to piss and you pass it, and then someone else has to piss now.
If we're all just passing the piss around, then humanity is like actually, a lot more connected than it once was.
Humanity's kind of saved. Well, I feel like we've talked a fair amount about Jordan's research. Let's learn a little bit more about Jordan herself. Let's hear what she's like outside of the lab in a game of Two Truths and a Lie. So, you know how this game is played. It's a classic game. I'm going to give you two true facts about Jordan. One of these is a lie. You all have to discuss and then guess which is which. So, here are the statements that you're going to have to decide. Jordan is writing a semi-autobiographical novel about someone who started a Ph.D. and then realized it's maybe not the path she should have been on. 2, Jordan enjoys skydiving as a hobby. Or 3, for years, Jordan had a Twilight-themed email address. Okay, so panelists, why don't you talk those out together? What do you think which feels like the lie?
Oof. I mean, one almost feels like it has to be true, like legally, right?
Tell me what you mean by legally there, Michael.
I just mean like if you are someone who's like a super genius and you had a PhD, but you're also creative, it feels like, okay, well, you're going to write it. Like 50 million people are like, would you ever want to write a book? And so you have to write the book. And writing is so fucking vague that it's hard to disprove, because that's like, I am writing a pilot too, but I'm never going to fix it.
Yeah. We're all writing. Okay, so here's the thing for me with these is that 2 of them feel very specific and one of them feels very vague. But the one that feels vague makes me think that that's like actually very true. And the one
which one?
The hobby, just like has a hobby, feels sort of vague as opposed to writing a PhD about their experience and Twilight themed email address. Those 2 seem kind of specific.
Wait, meaning you think 1 and 3 are correct?
No, meaning I think that 2 is definitely correct. Because I think Chris is a little chaos monster and he's trying to throw us off the scent.
Wait, Chrissy, wake up. Chrissy,
Oh,
wake up.
no,
Look,
not again.
I'm so sorry. This must have been your night.
It's okay. I actually do love it.
Month.
I like the
Okay, good. Here's the thing. Skydiving in Boston, Massachusetts, you can, like Cambridge, but Boston generally, you could probably only do for like 4 months a year. If this is a hobby, something that you do consistently, which is what a hobby is, like pottery or baking, like you wouldn't choose a hobby like that you can't do for most of the year in Cambridge, Mass/Boston.
Interesting. Okay. Do they have one of those indoor sky jump places in Cambridge? Do we know about that?
I know what you're talking about. You're like in a tube and the wind's blowing you up.
Yeah, those are very big in Texas.
I think that's actually the subway system in Boston. You just like throw yourself onto a grate and it lets you go up. But I don't think they have a lot of those.
So Joanna, wait, which ones do you think are true?
I think 1 and 3 are true. I think 2 is a lie.
I also think 1 and 3.
Then I have to go with consensus. And
the benefit of going with that is that you can blame us if it's wrong.
Yes, and it's good for you. And then we bear the brunt of it, and it's wonderful.
Okay.
For you only.
So everyone's gonna say that they think 2 is the lie, that you don't think she enjoyed skydiving. Okay, well, let's find out what is the lie. That's right. Skydiving was the lie.
Wait, that's so. Did you do this because you knew I'd have a spiral freak
It
out?
was not. It was not a double fake out. It was just some poor writing on my part, a little bit vaguer. However, it is important to know that Jordan, you did try and go skydiving, but the company canceled on you. They refused to let you skydive.
Why?
Yes, they did.
They said you're too important. We can't risk you.
I believe
Well,
that.
so I was going to go for my, I think, 17th birthday. And I think it was just a weather thing. This was back when I was living in Jersey.
That's very responsible.
Yeah. They
But
were like, thunderstorms and lightning, maybe don't jump out of a plane. And I was like, damn.
But you
And then I
are
never
writing a
rescheduled.
semi-autobiographical novel.
Yes.
If you had to approximate, go.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I actually just applied for a 9-month, novel writing fellowship-esque program. So
May I
see
ask,
if I get in.
if you had to approximate what page you are on in the writing of this novel, what would you say?
Well, the outline's done. It's shaping up to be probably around 23 chapters, and then I've written the first 40 pages.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's his writing.
That's great. That is writing.
What's the character's name? Main character. Or is it Jordan?
I don't know yet.
Allow me to
currently it's
suggest
just Jordan
Michael,
because
but
I'm like,
Yeah, Michael is up for grabs. Michael is putting Michael out there as an
if you
option
want,
for
no pressure at all, but could be Michael.
We're asking a lot of questions about this novel, and I think it's so great. I am going to buy it when it comes out, and that's so cool. It seems so hard to outline a novel. I have a lot of questions about the Twilight-themed email address.
Let's find out. Yes, what was it, first of all, Jordan?
It was silvervolvo21@yahoo.com. It's been
Silver
deleted
Volvo.
for about 8 years. I was Team Edward.
Okay. I
These
actually
days
want...
I'm Team Bella should have ditched both of them.
And now I actually want to pause this conversation for one moment so that I can add a little bit more information that I feel like is very important to it. So we talked to Jordan's mom to learn more about where an AI expert comes from. And that was actually where I learned this information about Twilight. So let's take a look. This is called Motherboard. Okay, so Jordan's mom, Debbie, is where we learned about her Twilight obsession. And Debbie was a delight, true delight. Here is what Debbie had to say about Jordan and Twilight. You have to watch this video.
So she loved the Twilight series when she was in middle school and read it obsessively. She may still have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Twilight series. And so when I expressed interest in reading it, she handed me a copy of it. I was going into her room and I was going to take the copy that was sitting at the top of her bookshelf. Little did I know that that was basically part of the Twilight shrine and that no other human was allowed to touch those books. I was given a book that looked as though it had been thrown into the bathtub and then allowed to air dry outside. And I was allowed to read that copy. And I said, well, but what about, and she's like, no. Those are not to be touched by hands other than mine.
Well, that is... There's a lot to unpack there, so I'd love for each of you to give us your reactions and questions in one of the greatest mom videos we've ever had on the show.
I love it. I was obsessed with Twilight. I don't know if I was obsessed with Twilight. I didn't have a shrine, but I had a Team Edward shirt and a Team Jacob shirt because I always went back and forth, honestly, which is pretty crazy of me. I think this is so fun. Was that book that you gave your mom, had it been thrown into the bathtub?
Yeah. What happened to that book?
I was not the one who did it because somebody left their copy. This was in middle school, and somebody I don't know, it fell out of their backpack or whatever, and I took it. So that was the condition it came in.
Okay.
Yeah, you do anything to get your hands on Twilight.
Well, so that was the first time I'd read it, and then I bought the hardcover box set, which was the set that Mom was not allowed to touch.
And you said that your mom said, and I can't tell if she's exaggerating or not, that it was part of a Twilight shrine. Is she exaggerating, or is there like a lock of Robert Pattinson's hair on your wall? Where are we at?
I mean, I definitely had the books like separate from my other books. And I probably had a poster.
In a shrine.
So,
I do feel like
a
if
small
you-
shrine.
I
An
do feel like if
effigy.
you even pause when someone says, was it a shrine? If you have to pause to think about it, that's a definite yes, it was a shrine.
That's a shrine. That's a shrine.
I also wrote in I think 7th grade, we had to write a research report on a topic of our choosing. And so I did not get this topic approved by my teacher, but I wrote it on the Twilight Saga. And there were 4 citations in that whole paper, and they were all 4 books. And I got an F, and then I had to redo it and write a new research paper about Jim Jones.
Oh, wow, what a jump to be like the leader of one of the most infamous cults of all time from a fictional character in the Twilight books.
Yeah.
Well,
it was like a 20-page research report too.
We're coming close to the end of the show here, so I want to get some more questions from the audience. Someone asked, and also comedians, if you have any questions that you want to ask, please feel free. But one of the questions from the audience was, how much do we as users change machine learning algorithms when we interact with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is it depends on what you're interacting with. So if you're thinking of like YouTube recommendations, social media feeds, stuff like that, those tend to be pretty personalized. And so everything you do is altering what the algorithm is going to recommend to you next. If you're thinking things like the Google Knowledge Graph, which is what essentially underlies Google search and helps when you search things, helps Google like make connections between the words that you're typing and like other things that are probably related topics that might not be immediately obvious. That tends to be, I'd say you have less of an impact in that situation. And then there are scenarios where you're like dealing with a pre-trained model where like if you're, for example, interacting with the DALL-E Mini or DALL-E 2, any like image generating AI model. In that case, the model's been trained, you're just giving it prompts and it's spitting out things based on information it already has. So you're not really changing the model at that point.
One of the other questions, and I do think this is one of the most important possible questions, Joanna, we'll get to you after this. Is this a quick yes or no? Are you planning to watch Air Bud, Jordan?
No.
Wow, okay. That's not the answer we were hoping for.
Okay, hard to hear.
Okay,
Wow.
Joanna, what was your question?
My question is, when someone asks me what I want in a scientist, I'd say the obsessive quality of a teenager that reads through all of the Twilight books. So, like, do you think that your like obsession with Twilight, does that relate it to your obsession with what you do?
Maybe. I hadn't thought about it until right now. I would say
this
that
is therapy, Jordan. This is therapy.
Exactly. I had therapy yesterday. I would say that I don't know that Twilight specifically influenced what I've been interested in doing outside of, reading about things like vampires and being like, how would you engineer a system like that? But I do definitely think that something I've, I guess, realized over the last couple of years, especially in grad school, is that like one of my core values is definitely creativity. And so for me, science is like an inherently creative pursuit. And so I think that the creativity that I get from, reading books and writing and storytelling and making content online and music and all that kind of stuff probably indirectly ties into the stuff I do in science.
Okay, can I ask a question about that?
Please.
Okay. I just want to know more about it. You said science is a creative pursuit, and I think that a lot of people don't think of science that way. They think of it as like people in lab coats who have like set out to achieve an objective or prove or disprove some theorem. In what way is science creative?
I mean, I think for me, when I think about like creativity in research in particular, like you're often approaching problems and they're unsolved problems. They're things that no one else has been able to find an answer to. And there isn't necessarily a clear path to figuring out how you would get to an answer if it even is the answer that you're looking for. And so I think because of that, you get to come up with like a lot of creative off-the-cuff brainstorming stuff, where you end up, coming to methods or approaches to the research that you're doing that like would not necessarily be an intuitive leap that someone would make just based on like reading a textbook about a topic. And so that's why I like doing research, because I get to like approach problems in like these weird and interesting ways that I think you don't get to do in like chem lab as an undergrad. But I do get why especially like people who aren't doing research don't find science to be creative, because I do feel like the way we teach science is like very rote and very, step 1, step 2, step 3, there is a clear answer. And if you don't get there, then like you did something wrong. Whereas research isn't really like that for me.
I want to follow up on that with a question from the audience too, which is, Jordan, you kind of sit between these two worlds because you're a person who's doing research. You're actually doing science yourself, but then you also have a really popular YouTube channel where you're explaining it and you're thinking about like how to make it accessible to people who don't have a background in science. So one of the questions that someone asked is, what is one of your favorite AI research papers that you've read? And I think just to tag on to that, what is something that you think everyone should be reading more about or learning more about because you think it's interesting and important?
Favorite AI research paper that I've read? Recently, it would probably be, this isn't actually a recent paper. I think it came out last year and it was written by a friend. But because for the channel, I often do a lot of digging on like fairness and bias research. I'm always interested in papers that take interesting approaches to fairness and bias. And so there's been a lot of interesting work lately on like power shifting and like other ways of like taking concepts of bias or fairness and like turning them into like equations based on like economic factors and stuff like that. And so there's a paper that I read, I can't remember the name of it, I think last year, that basically focused on like alternative ways of modeling power shifting. How do you include things like, when we look at problems in AI, we're often thinking about there's the person using the model, like the person deploying it, and then there's like the people that interact with it. So like the example that usually comes up is facial recognition for like law enforcement. And so in that case, like the police are the people who are using the technology, whereas like people on the street who are walking by who get caught in the video feed are the people who are affected by the technology. But what we don't often talk about is like, okay, there's those two groups of people, but then there's like all of the people who aren't in those two groups of people who might get rebound effects from the technology itself. And so that paper focused on like, how do you basically like create formulas that actually incorporate that into your modeling? And then also like, how do you very specifically define fairness using like mathematical models? So that was a cool one. What was the second question?
I think honestly you answered it with like, that seems like something we should all be learning more about it and answering. And Jordan, we're coming to the end of our time. Obviously, you're such an interesting person, and this is such a huge topic. We could probably talk for like 5 more hours. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. And before we wrap up, we're coming to the end of the show. So let's just check in really quickly on the score, which is, a totally arbitrary amount of points which have been given. It looks like Chrissy Shackelford had the most points, and Michael Cruz-Kane had the least, so the show is called Wrong Answers Only. Michael, you have won by having the best wrong answers, or if you want to look at it the other way, Chrissy, you have lost by winning. The only clear loser here is Joanna by being in the middle. So next time, do better or worse, Joanna. And before we go, our final question for you, Jordan, is what do you hope that audience members who are out there, what do you hope that they take away from tonight's show?
I mean, I guess I would definitely say, one, similar to what I said, I think in the video that ran at the beginning, like algorithms are based on people. And so don't treat them as if they are smarter than people, as if they are less biased than people. They're not. They have all of our biases and quirks and idiosyncrasies all tied up in them. And then I think the other thing would be just that like science can be a super creative pursuit. It's not just like textbooks and reading and following instructions on your lab notebook. And if that's something that you're interested in, then I would definitely recommend exploring it.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's great, Jordan. And so panelists, that is what Jordan hopes that you take away from today's show. what will you actually be taking away? Chrissy, what will you be taking away from today's show?
Yeah, I think it was a hard pill to swallow for me, this show, actually, to find out that the technology seems really far away from having my husband piss for me. And that the only achievable way right now is maybe by sweating my pee out of my hands. And that's kind of what I'll be thinking about all night. Yeah.
Okay, great. Joanna, what will you be taking away?
Well, listen, so my dad is more of a social scientist. He's an economist, but he always tells me that our careers are more similar than I believe, because he always needs to find creative solutions to world problems. And, being the daughter of this person, I never listened and I didn't care. But now that Jordan told me, I'm going to take that to heart. And thank you, Jordan. You saved me thousands of dollars in therapy.
Wow, I love that. Really, kind of across the board, really solving some family problems here, Jordan, for both Chrissy and Joanna. Michael, what are you going to take away?
Well, I think it's going to be two things. Chris, thanks for asking. The first one is going to be what Jordan was saying, and when she answered my question about science being creative. I just think that's so fascinating, the idea that I think anything like sort of mathematical or whatever, is that right brain, left brain, whatever it is, people have this assumption that it's like a really closed and discrete system. And I think the idea that there's so many opportunities for creativity there is beautiful. But really, it's the idea that there is a man in this world who would take the burden of pissing from his wife and think of that as his superpower. I'll never forget that man whose name I don't know as long as I live. I will always think
You're talking about my husband?
I am.
I hope to introduce you. I actually do think you have met, or we'll talk later, but
You know what? I actually, Chrissy, I think we should blow Michael Cruz-Kane's mind by just telling him the first name of your husband.
Michael.
It's also Michael.
His name is Michael.
His name is Michael.
His name is Michael.
That's the man who you're going to look up to for the rest of your life, Michael.
When you said blow my mind, I thought you were going to be like, his name is urethra.
Okay. Well, we can't end on a higher note than that. That is perfect. Thanks so much to all three of you for playing. If you are in the audience, you're going to get an email after the show with bonus information from our expert and links to get deeper into Jordan's work and her research, as well as some more great jokes and comedy from each of our panelists. We'd also love to get any feedback from you about the show. We're always trying to improve. And that is it for tonight. We are back next month with a show that is all about fire. You do not want to miss that one. You can register right now at labx.org/WAO. In the meantime, though, thank you so much to tonight's expert, Jordan Harrod. Thank you to our panelists, Chrissy Shackelford, Joanna Hausman, and Michael Cruz-Kane. Thanks as well to everyone at the National Academy of Sciences and LabX and our back-end folks, Amechi, Jesse, Amir, Dempsey, and Mario on the tech team. I am your host, Chris Duffy, and this has been Wrong Answers Only. Thank you so much. Have a great night.